Thank you very much. Yeah, I have the great honor to talk about the cloud native movement. In my opinion, one of the most interesting movements in the last years, or how I like to call it, how Kubernetes saves your ass before you know it. Well, but to start, I want to have a look back a few years when we all talked about the cloud and the way into the cloud. I remember the time when the cloud was the silver bullet to everything. You just have to take on the journey into the cloud and every problem goes away. You pay less, your infrastructure is safer, your resources are behind one API, you can just automate everything, infrastructure is code, everything is cool, and everything only one click away. You only have to embark on that journey down the one road into the cloud, tarred by AWS, Google, Azure, and all the other hyperscalers and cloud providers. The cloud offers all the resources under one API. You have the basic resources like memory, compute, networking, and some add-on services like object storage, application servers as a service, database as a service, streaming as a service, to name only a few. But today, a few cloud projects later, a few RFPs later, I think, in my opinion, it is not really a straight road. It's more like that. You have, on the one hand, one cloud provider. You have, on the other hand, another cloud provider, and yet another cloud provider, and everybody has its own API, its own add-on services, and you have to decide which road to go down. And if you have decided, well, you're there. Even in the open source movement, when you talk about OpenStack, you have an upstream foundation that defines APIs, and then you have some implementations with custom networking, custom load balancing, and yeah, we also have an OpenStack cloud without custom networking, so you can go down the vanilla road, the open infrastructure road, but it has some limitations. So interoperability, which was one of the main focuses of OpenStack, is not everywhere. It depends on the implementation of your OpenStack cloud. But what did the cloud movement bring to us? Well, pay as you grow. It's easier to scale. You have the resources on demand. No week-long waiting for a virtual machine. You have integration of network, load balancing, storage, compute, everything under one API, which wasn't possible before, where you had to integrate your custom firewall API, your custom load balancer API, and every service you wanted to use had its own API, and you had to implement against it if you wanted to do infrastructure as code. But what does that mean? We just moved the vendor lock-in we had before with all the custom hardware we bought, just one layer top, or one layer upstairs. So, yeah, but there is a saying in computer science, there is no problem in computer science you cannot solve by another abstraction. And that is where Kubernetes comes into the play. So we have a new abstraction layer and everything is fine. Yeah, well, is it? We have an operating system for the cloud. So Kubernetes is the operating system for the cloud, to make it simple. Yeah, but isn't that another vendor login, just another abstraction layer above? I don't know. No, I don't think so. Why is that? Because we have a source code of Kubernetes which is owned by a foundation, by the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is a part of the Linux Foundation. And we have, well, nearly all the providers, cloud service providers and Linux distributors have their own Kubernetes distribution. And the key to all that is they are interoperable. So you can decide which way you want to, or which flavor of Kubernetes you like, and you can go down there. And if that distribution isn't your favorable distribution anymore, you can switch. and it works. So, interoperability is the key. It's like Linux. You have an operating system which has some features when you use Red Hat or some features when you use Ubuntu, but in the basic, they are all interoperable. And the source code is owned by a foundation. So Kubernetes is currently one of the second, or is the largest project right now behind the Linux kernel in infrastructure, the largest open source project in that domain. So there are more than 100 companies that contribute to that source code. And it is the first time in operations, in my opinion, that we have a uniform model how to operate services in production. And not only first-day operations, but also second-day operations, and integrated. And not only the easy parts like provision a new VM, destroying an old VM, so lifecycle operations, but also HA. What happens if one hypervisor goes down or one node goes down? Failover mechanisms, coping with stateful sets, coping with replication of services, dynamic scaling. All these problems are modeled into the Kubernetes world. And if we have a look at the abstraction layers of Kubernetes, we also have southbound APIs. So we can integrate over all the different infrastructure providers. Here, namely CSI and CNI stands for Common Storage Interface and Common Networking Interface. So it doesn't matter what your infrastructure below looks like, you can abstract from them that, and you can stay in your one model. So, for example, CSI, you can integrate with Ceph, Cinder, NetApp, vSphere, and all the other storage providers. And on the other hand, networking, you can use different overlay models like Calico, Juniper Contrail, Flannel, and it depends on your use case. So you can carve out your special infrastructure and abstract it into one common model. And we have a bit of source of monitoring, and above that, the cloud native execution runtime, where you can plug in different container runtimes. So perhaps you have heard about them. The most important one is Docker currently, but there are also Kata containers, gvisor. These are, if you like more virtualization, more security around your containers. So the virtualization is a bit more sophisticated in that case, but they are still in the beginning. So, but you have another API where you can carve out your way you want to do Kubernetes. And above that, we have the scheduling, the interesting parts, which takes care about the HA, the failover, and all the scheduling of the state you want to have. So the core of Kubernetes is declaratives. You say, I want my infrastructure to be like that. And Kubernetes takes care about that, so the infrastructure always stays in that state you defined in a declarative way. And if something happens, Kubernetes tries to take care about that. For example, if your hypervisor goes down, or your node goes down, or your storage doesn't work. So it is an open framework for infrastructure which has north and southbound APIs. But the interesting part is how you go down that road. So just a short question, how far are you down the cloud native road? Who has Kubernetes in production? A few of you. So have a look at the CNCF Cloud Native Trail Map for everybody who doesn't have Kubernetes in production, and how to start. You start with containerization. So you have a look at your legacy application and containerize it. Currently, I would use Docker because it's everywhere. You find people who know about Docker and how to do it. If you are able to containerize your application and you have done that, then the second part is to automate the building of these containers and the deployment into production. So you want to be able to press a big red button, and you want to have your update in production, which makes releasing easy and stable and safe. If you have done that, then you go into Kubernetes and write your infrastructure as code and deploy these containers in a Kubernetes cluster. And Kubernetes takes care of the operations, of course, only to some degree. And if you have done that, then you go into the monitoring domain and do observability. Observability means you use the data the containers emit into Prometheus to query about the state of your cluster. So the monitoring has a bit of a shift currently. You don't have your Isinga that queries, yeah, well, is the container there, is the container there, is the container there? But the container emits its state, or not its state, or telemetry data into Prometheus, and you write queries against these time series data to query about the state and to generate events where you can react on, for example, with alerting or something like that. Well, that's the way to go. It's not easy, it's not fast, but you get the benefits bit by bit. Well, where does Noris Networks work come into play? Well, we accompany you on your journey from legacy applications to the cloud-native world. And we have some technologies and platforms to support you on your way. We can do metal co-location, so you can take your legacy applications and put them into our data centers and start from there. We also operate your hardware and manage your hardware, there's no problem. If you want to go upstairs a layer, we have two infrastructure as a service platforms. We have on the one hand OpenStack, which is part of our open infrastructure strategy, and we have enterprise-backed VMware as a virtualization platform. Above that, we are talking about Kubernetes. We have Kubernetes in two different flavors. We have on the one hand OpenShift with enterprise support if you want the whole enterprise package, and on the other hand we have vanilla Kubernetes, which is a part of our open infrastructure strategy. And above that, we add on services in different flavors. For example, we manage your migration and modernization scenarios. We support you in Agile and DevOps consulting. We do the project management. If you move into our data centers, we support you with ITIL. And on the other hand, we also do technical value addition services like automation, continuous delivery, containerization, and managed services in the different platforms. So it's basically mix and match, and you can carve out your solution based on our technology portfolio. And why you should go to Noris Network as a digitalization partner? Well, we build and construct our own data centers, some of the most modern ones in Europe. We have our own backbone for interconnectivity between these data centers for safe data transport. We have strong certification background if you have highly security requirements in the data centers and in your platforms. And we speak bimodal IT. We know the legacy IT and we know the new cloud-native world, and we are able to accompany you on the road from the legacy world to the new cloud-native world as your mate with DevOps skills, and so we can together shape the future of your platforms. To cut a long story short, well, the road into the cloud-native world is no straight road, but it does not matter anymore. Thank you very much.